destiny. There's a kid and you need it for girls, for boys, who measure on the view. And May, what in his hand would you do? For girls, for boys, who measure on the view. And May, what in his hand would you do? Shut up with them, they were about shut up with them. Shut up with them, oh dear, shut up with them, eh? Shut up with them, auntie, shut up with them. Shut up with them.
Music.
It's straight fam production. Straight fam beats. It's straight fam production. Straight fam beats.
And if you dance like Jackson, I'm on your echo come. And if you dance like Remy, I'm on your echo come. Oh, Nico, while I'm not there. Oh, Nico, while I'm so there. And if you dance like Jackson, I'm on your echo come. And if you dance like Remy, I'm on your echo come. Oh, Nico, while I'm not there. Oh, Nico, while I'm so there. I'm okay, Baba, me no ni conga. I'm okay, Baba, I no ni conga. I'm okay, Baba, olo mi yo. I'm okay, olo mi to mi ginger. Yeah, and the way you be moving your body, your tito. And your body's amazing, you're perfect, head to toe. And I know what it's like, my baby, no be so. And I'm loving the way that you're making your belly go. And if you dance like Jackson, I'm on your echo come. And if you dance like Remy, I'm on your echo come. Oh, Nico, while I'm not there. Oh, Nico, while I'm so there. And if you dance like Jackson, I'm on your echo come. And if you dance like Remy, I'm on your echo come. Oh, Nico, while I'm not there. Oh, Nico,
You're so easy to love. You're so easy to love. You're so easy to love. You're so easy to love.
Baby girl, ooh, baby girl, you know you're the only one. Beginning and every time I see your face, it's just 1,000 words. You make my life.
Hi, my name is Gracie P, and you're listening to Starr Radio UK.
Hi, you're listening to Roz on Starr Radio. Join me every Tuesday from 4 until 6, where we look at life in 3D and tackle the tough topics. Good afternoon. You're tuned into Insight on Starr Radio UK with me, Roz, where we look at life in 3D, tackle the tough topics, all through the lens of the feminist perspective.
Yeah!
Good afternoon, Star Radio UK. You heard it, life through the prism of the feminine perspective. And today, it's all about Insight with Roz on Star Radio. Child brides. Tough topics. That's if I can stop and listen to myself. All about child brides. Hi, you're listening to Roz on Star Radio. Join me every Tuesday from 4 until 6 where we look at life in 3D and tackle the tough topics.
The truth will set you free.
To each his own, that's my philosophy. Actually, it is my philosophy. I very much believe in to each his own. No problems there. Except, now come on. Good afternoon, welcome to Star Radio with myself, Roz. And you know how it goes. And if you haven't, if you're joining me for the first time, listen, I tell you at the beginning of the program, even though I might have gone a little bit wobbly this week, I look at life through the prism of being a black female. For two reasons. First and foremost, I'm a black female. How else can I see the world? And secondly, because I only have one perspective, but I like to see what's happening with other women and other black women, because life for us is very, very different. You know, I did a show elsewhere, and on it I had a couple of young people. Look out for the show. it was my final show with another station that I worked with, and on it, I've got these young black girls. They're 21, so they've finished uni or just finishing university, and they have very strong views about what they want and how they're going to achieve things. Beautiful. You'd be immensely proud, or at least you think one would be immensely proud of them. You'd have to listen to the call-in section to find out that it's not easy being a black woman. The message that these girls were saying, and I haven't put the show up. The show shall go up next week. You'll recognise it because I'll tell you it's the last. And what you'll hear is these black girls saying that black women are invisible. It was actually the subject of some controversy. And I tell you this because today, and this is a good thing, so don't you feel for 1 second that this is a bad thing. Some parents, a couple, were jailed. The mother got 3.5 years and the father got 4.5 years. They basically took their child to Bangladesh and 18, less than 18, to force her into marrying a first cousin. By the way, if you don't understand what that means, it means the gene pool is too close. First cousins marrying, effectively, chances are a lot higher that the child will somehow or the other be disabled, either mentally impaired or physically. Chances go way up because the bloodline is way too close. Now, the family has not been named in this action in the Leeds Crown Court. They haven't been named. What the 20-year-old said, she has a new identity. She said, "I know I will always have to remain cautious, but knowing those monsters are going to prison, I feel the uttermost freedom in my heart. I want other girls to know that forcing someone to marry is wrong. I want to be able to give a message to my siblings and other people who find themselves in this situation that life goes on. I want my elders to know that it is illegal and you can't treat your family like this. I want to be able to hold my head high, knowing that I stood up for what is right. I want to be able to live knowing I will not be a victim of my parents' honour and reputation." That's pretty powerful stuff. The bit that got me, I get a little bit silly sometimes, when she says, "I will not live in shame, I am now free. I will not live in shame, I am now free." And I hear these conversations and it hurts because I'm a black female. And this is what happens to women. We are not treated as human beings, we're treated as property. Now this isn't a black and white thing. And again, this is something I get in trouble for. I think it was yesterday I saw a clip where a man wolf whistled at a woman in France. And she must have told him to pack it in or something. Anyway, he follows around and the way he hits this woman in the face, you see her head move. Shocking, isn't it? But I don't want to go into the wider perspective. I just want to focus, I want to hone this down. What I started with when I introduced this program about black women being invisible. Remember that conversation? You remember that's where I started? It was only a couple of minutes ago. Come on, you haven't forgotten already. And marriage. And I'll tell you why. Because very often we believe that this is something that happens. People who are in Asian subcontinent. So this is Bangladeshi people, Pakistani people. But it's but we don't actually shine the light. This happens to black girls. Listen to what I said. This happens to black girls. Black girls are forced into marriages with men. There are girls who are forced to marry men and have sexual relationships with them. Now, I've heard of this with people as young as 7, And it's not one place in Africa. So we cannot say it's all of Africa. It happens in different places across that massive continent. Oh, we don't talk about it. And I'm absolutely convinced that if it's happening, that a girl from this country is being taken abroad to get married, and she's of Asian descent, I'm telling you, I feel it in my waters that it's happening to black women, black girls in this country. So whose marriage is it? This isn't about the girls. Shall I tell you why? Because they don't even be seen as, they're not even seen as human beings. Seriously. In some cases, they're just seen as something, property, chattel. I think maybe a cow has more status. I kid you not. I kid you not. And I find this really frightening, and I find it very devastating. I find it devastating because ultimately, power, whether you're black or white, is about some people, not everybody, right? I'm looking at negative power, not positive power. People wanting to control other people's lives and tell them what to do. And that's the whole problem with patriarchy. When men want to dominate a society, men don't know better than women. They don't know more than women. See what they do have? They have more physical strength. We've got to put our hands up. Men are stronger than women, which, as far as I'm concerned, gives you an obligation to look after and care for women. So when you see a woman being assaulted by a man, the men are supposed to jump in. That's what you take your strength to do. And if it is that there's just him and there's three of you, guess what? Chances are you will win. So I want to sit here today and I want to look at this whole issue that's happening on the continent of Africa, and I fear, I don't know, though it has been suggested to me, that it's happening here. What happened to this young Bangladeshi girl is happening in various nations on the continent of Africa. It's not good enough that we call this tradition. It's not good enough that we call this culture. It's not acceptable. This is about domination of, worse yet, a child. 7. There's one interview that I heard. I'll see if I can pull it up for you. And the girl, excuse me, the girl was 7 years of age, and the husband was 16 or 17. Have you seen the 7-year-old child? Have you seen those scrawny? I remember myself as a 7-year-old child. One scrawny, times have changed, but I was one scrawny little individual. You don't know if you're coming or going. How could you possibly be married? How could you possibly be forced into a situation where you're a bride? So you know what? If you're kind enough to listen regularly, then you know that this is a subject that I covered in terms of the United States of America. This isn't about it doesn't happen or it hasn't happened. This is about we need to talk about it to bring the story out so that other nations recognize that we of the diaspora are looking, we're challenging. And even if we are not of African descent, that is not a reason for us not to care about what's happening to women and girls and women around the world. But I'm focusing in today on Africa simply because when the headlines report these stories, it's quite often about people from the Asian subcontinent. I want to talk about what's happening on the African continent. It's really important that we recognise North, South, East and West Africa is a problem. I want to home in on it. I want us to talk about it. I want us to put this in the light. If we talk about supporting causes, isn't this one to support? Ending child marriage. And when I say ending it, the first step is obviously to introduce the law. The second step is to make sure the money is there to enforce the law. This has got to end. And in some regards, I actually think it's getting worse. No, isn't that scary? To think that it's getting worse? But I'll tell you what we'll do. Let's pop over and let's start by listening to some perspectives on this. And then when we come back, what we will do is we'll discuss it some more. I nearly gave you the music then, yeah. So here we go. I'm going to start in Malawi. Yeah, let's start with Malawi.
Children in Malawi, especially when they're young, they have very high hopes for the future. They dream about being doctors, they dream about being pilots. But the environment in which they live in does not always enable those dreams to come true. Child marriage is a form of gender-based discrimination. It's a form of violence against women because it largely affects girls. And if you look at the consequences of child marriage on the rights of women and girls, it's devastating. 1 in 2 girls in Malawi are married before their 18th birthday.
What are the main factors that lead to early marriage? Poverty. She thinks poverty leads to early marriage in Malawi. Is there another factor? Yes. Cultural practices. Parents forcing their children or girls to get married, yes? So, what are the impacts of early marriage on us? As Malawi's Fatima?
It leads to school dropout.
Early marriages lead to school dropouts. How will it lead to school dropouts?
Child marriage continues to perpetuate inequality because girls are not able to go to school. It affects their health. It affects their ability to marry only when they are willing and able to do so. And it affects their ability to be able to be free from violence. VSU is a victim support unit. It's a space at the police station where women that are facing violence can go for help. It has helped actually to encourage women and girls to come forward to report violence, but challenges remain.
So these registers are of about 110 pages, but we can complete these in 2 months. You can imagine the number of gender-based violence cases are reported almost every day. They are accused of victims requiring our services, yet we don't have enough space. This room, if we are to measure it, is about 2 meters by 1.5. If we are to receive a victim who requires to be resting somewhere, it's difficult.
These girls, when they come home, they are still young, they're around 14, 15, they are scared because they are still young, not mature, either physically or even mentally. To compare with the number of young girls who were giving birth in those years, like in 1990s and nowadays, the number is increasing.
Child marriage is as a result of government failure to address the rights of women and girls and to empower them. There's this vicious cycle of violation of rights and inequality. If there are no opportunities for girls to go to school, they get married. When they get married, still they are not able to continue with education. So they continue being subordinate. They continue being invisible in society. The most basic starting point to protect girls against child marriage is having a very clear minimum age of marriage. It ensures a uniform application of the law. If you're under the age of 18, you cannot be married. The government needs to make sure that they have a very clear plan of how they want to address child marriage. Having a national plan that sets out the legal reforms that need to be done, the programmatic initiatives that need to be taken in order to address child marriage. The consequences of child marriage are far-reaching. They don't just affect girls in childhood, they follow them to their adulthood. They affect their families, they affect their communities, and in the end, they affect the whole country.
Deep. Wow. So this has long-term consequences. Now, I have to tell you, because it's important to keep you apprised, Malawi has actually stopped marriage. At least passed a law that says you can't get married unless you're 18 or above. Don't laugh at that, because that's better than the United States of America, where I think it's only in Florida they have passed that law because a black woman campaigned to have the law passed. So in Florida you have to be 18 to get. But I want to keep the focus on, and we will do comparisons, because I don't want anyone going away with the idea, oh, this is Africa, Africa's backward, as if somehow or the other you gloss it over with a little bit of Dallas or I don't know what programs are on television, but as if these things don't happen in the West, and that's why I threw the bit in. So I promised you it wasn't just Malawi who have actually passed a law and they're trying to tackle this whole problem of children being married. And I just can't get my head over a 7-year-old. I keep thinking of my scrawny little self of 7, and then thinking, wow, children are being married at the age of 7. It's quite frightening. It's very frightening. Do you know, there's a report by Save the Children, and it found that one girl under the age of 50. The same study goes on to say that girls as young as are forced to marry men. And Ethiopia, one place where that happens. We're going to have a look at what happens in Ethiopia. That's Sudan. In fact, there's so many places I can. What we're going to do now, we're going to pop over to South Africa. So here, well, listen, report from South Africa.
Deep within the Eastern Cape in South Africa, young women come together. They chat, sing and dance. But what they are about to discuss is no trivial matter, and they choose to come together to talk about it. Ukutwala is the forced marriage of young women. It's a cultural practice that women's rights organizations would like to stop. Nonkosi regularly organizes educational workshops. She tells her audience they must not do to their daughters what their mothers did to them. According to Xhosa tradition, girls are kidnapped and taken to their future husbands. Some are taken with their family's consent, some not. But it's rare that a girl will forget her ordeal.
The domestic violence, it's happening, but the women, they are not aware of the human rights perspective. They feel oppressed, but because of the, what can I say, because of the cultural domination. Because as women, we are being told to do the stuff, and we don't have a choice, that's the thing.
Each story is more moving than the last. This woman was kidnapped when she was just 14. Brought to a man 30 years older in a strange place. She was tied up so that he could make a woman out of her.
I'm only interrupting that because it doesn't matter how many times I hear it, I still feel a sense of outrage, of shock, of deep upset and great sadness. Why would you want to have sex with somebody who was 30 years? Why would you want to have sex with a child? And then this is the thing that I find really upsetting. You rape the child and then you turn around and say you want to make you're making them a woman. It's rape. You're raping a child. Raping a child does not convert her to being a woman. To be a woman, one has to grow up, go through a series of experiences, and then mature and develop opinions. That's how you end up becoming a woman. And I just find it so terribly, 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 terribly upsetting that men use these expressions and it's not challenged. And I guess when people hear my frustration, they think that I'm anti-man. I'm not anti-man. I just don't understand why more people are not standing up to this. I do. I struggle with this whole idea of cultural practice. I struggle with the whole idea of culture. I do. If you're doing something to another human being, if you're doing something to a child, it's patently wrong. Maybe I'm too intolerant. Maybe. Maybe, I don't know. I can't see how. But I just think it's dreadful when two people... I mean, think about this physically, okay? If you're a man, will you do me a favour? Will you think about this too? Can you imagine your friends, brothers, holding you down, somebody pulling down their trousers and then taking advantage of you sexually? Not pleasant, is it? Why would you want two people to hold down a girl and then rape her? Why would you do that? Where is the love? Where is the pleasure? Where's the humanity? I find it really distressing. I'm amazed that these children grow up to be women and that they're able to move on with their lives, because I find the emotional scarring so deep, so fraught. And I think this is why I don't like that trope of the strong black woman, because it means that we are treated in such negative ways and people don't look at it. But anyway, let me get back to this piece on forced marriage in South Africa, which is apparently a custom. Let me continue. I'll go back a bit. We might have to hear that horrible bit again. But just think about what we're doing to our children. My.
Brought to a man 30 years older in a strange place, she was tied up so that he could make a woman out of her. This mother of 8 children also experienced ukutwala. She explains that she was so naive and innocent that she had no idea she was pregnant. She believed she was simply ill. As for this woman, she was brave enough to describe her first night. She was hurt so badly, she could not get up the next morning. A 12-year-old child hides behind her. Her name is Akona. She remains silent. Her story is more recent. She was also kidnapped and taken from home. Orphaned, she will later learn how her aunt sold her for 2 sheep and a cow. Akona spent a month with her husband. She was brave enough to escape to the city of East London. She was discovered by the South African Social Services, who found her foster parents. In a country with a diverse belief system, South African authorities are aware of the devastating consequences of ukutwala. As teenagers get pregnant, drop out of school, and are infected with HIV.
It is a rape. Nothing else. It's rape. And the person who is raping, sometimes they think that if you rape a virgin, if he is HIV positive and he rapes a virgin, there is a belief that the HIV will be taken away from him, which is not true. So we are trying to educate these people to report rape cases immediately, that is within 72 hours.
Akona is fortunate to have avoided contracting AIDS. She's back at school and trying hard to forget what happened to her. Still traumatized, she tells us about her sister, who was not as lucky as she was. In Nelson Mandela's country, too many women are still the silent victims of archaic ancestral rights. Only a few feel strong enough to share their stories. This NGO is spearheading the fight. They've pressurized the authorities in Pretoria to outlaw ukutwala and declare that it violates the rights of children under South Africa's progressive constitution. But the founder of this NGO knows the war is not yet won.
The problem is that we in South Africa are busy talking about a traditional courts bill, which is going to give power to traditional leaders. And when that happens, gender equality is going to take a dive. So it is a critical concern for us. We have to provide stronger evidence that this practice is happening, that it is harmful to young women, in order for the state to recognize it, acknowledge it, and actually respond to it appropriately.
This women's organization won its first court case last February. A man was sentenced to 22 years in prison for kidnapping and raping a 14-year-old girl. But he has the right to appeal and is doing just that in the Cape High Court.
Wow. So that's South Africa. So we've looked at Malawi, we've looked at South Africa. Same conversation. Grown men are having sex with children. I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. Grown men are raping children. Children can't consent. Children can't give permission. And adults are complicit. The men are complicit. And sometimes women are complicit because they're selling these children for goats and sheep. Did I say sheeps? Naughty girl. For goats and sheep and all sorts. And I just find it really worrying and very frightening. And that's why I have to go to a break so that I can cleanse.
You can catch me.
Hi, you're listening to Roz on Starr Radio. Join me every Tuesday from 4 until 6 where we look at life in 3D and tackle the tough topics.
Oh, for the longest time I've been chasing for the dream, looking for what's meant to be. When it's right in front of me, I can't take it anymore. Now I've opened up the door, I can see a way ahead. As I lie here in my bed, it's so clear. Oh, that my destiny is just to be happy, happy. Oh, with me. Oh, I'd like to testify. I found the God inside, preaching to me night and day. Deliver me from hell, I pray. Heaven's really here on earth, and the angels really fly. Believe me, baby, won't you try and touch the sky? Oh, it's so clear. My destiny is just to be happy. Oh, so clear, so clear, so clear. It's so clear that my destiny is just to be happy with me.
You're listening to Insight with Roz on Starr Radio, tackling the tough topics.
You say you love the way I smile, my impeccable style. My body is ridiculous and could I stay a while? You know I like you, no denial. So all of that's cool to me. But when you tell me I'm the truth, you wanna show me proof. I'm always in the booth and I should cut my niggas loose. Now that makes me recluse and think, what are you playing at? Hey boy, you know I got groupies. Brothers use music to pursue me. I don't wanna be mean, so I'ma come clean and let you know I've got groupies. Brothers use music to pursue me. I don't wanna be mean, so I'ma come clean and let you know I'm not your girl. No, no, no. I'm not your girl. No, no, no. I'm not your girl. No, no, no. I'm not your girl for real. No, no. Now when you say you love my song, by pulling on my tongue, we go and hit a bong, and baby we just get along. You know that there is nothing wrong, cause all of that's great to me. Oh, but when you're telling me already you don't wanna take it steady, you're looking for a flat that we can share up in Chelsea. I'm thinking, is he okay? Cause clearly you're mad. Now boy, you know I've got groupies. Brothers use music to pursue me. I don't wanna be mean, I'ma come clean and let you know I've got groupies. Brothers use music to pursue me. I don't wanna be mean, I'ma come clean and let you know I'm not your girl. No, no, no. I'm not your girl. No, no, no. saying like,
no, Ray, I
yeah,
swear
babe.
to you, I'm not leaving him on.
So why is he calling you?
I don't know. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb. It goes straight to voicemail, and he's still ringing me.
Does he record your voicemail? I bet he records your voicemail. What do they say? Like, where you at? If I've said I'm busy,
yeah,
I'm not giving you a reason, it means I don't want to meet. It is code for, why don't they get it though? Why don't they? Point number one, do not excessively call me.
If I have not called you back yet,
don't call me.
Don't call me.
Don't call me.
I'm busy.
I bet she's busy. Yeah.
Like, I might be busy chilling.
I might be with another man.
I'm just too busy for you right now.
I'm too busy for you.
Don't call me back yet. It's not time.
It's not
Wait,
time yet.
Wait,
I haven't read the WhatsApp. Don't say the question mark. Yes.
Oh my.
Don't say the question mark.
All the time.
Why?
Why?
For why?
Why?
For why?
Questioning me about your question.
Don't use me as your DP.
They think it's cute. That's not cute.
I don't want to be Bay of the Week. Bay of the Month.
I'm tired. I'm tired. I'm tired of it. Why?
Hi, you're listening to Roz on Star Radio. Join me every Tuesday from 4 until 6 where we look at life in 3D and tackle the tough topics. Good afternoon, Star Radio UK. Roz with you, and we're looking at the fact of child marriage. Personally, I call it forced marriage. You're forcing children into having an adult relationship with partners who are 2, 3, 4 times their age. It's disgusting. End of story. It's just so incredibly wrong. And it isn't just a problem that happens on the Asian subcontinent. It's something that happens on the African continent. It's something that happens to girls. It's something that happens to women. We've got to be really clear about this. We have to be clear about what it is we want to set out for the standards of our lives and the communities that we live in. And for the world that we live in. What sort of world do we want to see? Do we want to see a world where, and this comes back to this whole point about black women being invisible, this is something that is being tackled. So let's be clear about that. There is good news. It is being tackled. I told you what that in Malawi they've already introduced the law. But as you can see, in South Africa, introducing the law is one thing, but if you're going to allow courts and leaders to have a certain amount of leeway as to what they can and cannot do, then there are traditional practices, customs, cultures. I don't like any of those expressions, because what they do is they allow gender inequality. By gender, it means that girls and women are lesser. And I just think it's frightening. I think it's wicked. I think it's evil. I think it's terrible. I think it's monstrous. I do, and there's something that we can do about it, and I want us to talk about it. I want us to go away leaving this program today with a little shiver. You know that song I played before we went to the break, I'm Not Your Girl? Do you know what I like about it? I like the fact it's about young people. Now, there's an equivalence of age, and they're talking about being romantically involved or not being romantically involved. They're making choices. They're learning to grow up. They're young people going into adulthood. You know, some of these cases I'm talking to you about, the child is 7 and is being sold to the man. And I as you can hear, words fail me. Words fail me. I can't understand how we're not getting to grips with this problem more quickly, but they say it takes a while to change. I don't know, perhaps, and I get criticised because some people think that, what was it I was called? Was it a Negropean? It was supposed to be an insult because I'm born and bred a Brit. And of course, you look at things through the lens of how you grew up and, you know, the world that you're in. And it's not a practice over here. So I do find it a little bit horrifying. Especially when I look at a 7-year-old child, anywhere, it doesn't matter where she is, anywhere in the world, and I think, how can you want to marry a 7-year-old child and then have sex with them? Or in the case of that 14-year-old girl, and you're being held down by 2 people while somebody violates your body. It's just so dreadful. But let me stop talking and let's listen a little bit more about how this is continuing on the continent of Africa. So it's not just Asia. And headlines in this country, this is about black women being visible. By the way, Black Women Talking next week, wonderful artist coming in by the name of Sabina. But let's go back to how girl children are being forced into marriage. And if you're being forced into marriage, you have to ask the question that this program has, whose marriage? Ain't no child consenting.
Amhara, in northern Ethiopia, a land with thousands of years of tradition. One tradition marries girls and boys when they're still children. They may be as young as 7, 6, or even 5. Half the girls in this part of Ethiopia will be married before they're 15. Some say that if a girl is old enough to carry water, she is old enough to be married. Early marriage has many consequences for a girl. Education is often the first casualty. Some of the girls in this class are already married. How long they will stay in school remains to be seen. The loss of education harms not just the girls, but in the long run, entire communities.
ትንሽ ከፍ ሳትል ዛሬ ያለ እድሜዋ ነው ያረም መውለድ የለባትም። ያለ እድሜዋ መውለድ የለባትም። ማን ነገር ሲሉን የሰማሁት እንጂ
The voice you heard at the end was a 7-year-old girl who's married. I beg your pardon. Married at 7. And it's not just marriage, i.e. that they're living with a man. First of all, just check that out. A 10-year-old married since she was things that we need to with each other about. And it happens, I honestly believe, other than that. Now, of course, there will be acceptable. There's older women in the community who think that being one of 6 wives is fine, but there are lots who don't. There are lots of children who are unhappy about it. And things have got to change. I can't just keep saying because we've been behaving badly for 1,000 years we must continue that conduct. This is about the rights of women. It's why I'm a feminist. This is not nice. This is not good. We're not just damaging the child. We're scarring them for life. But we're scarring the children that they have. Scarring the ability of people to live the best lives that they can. And I guess that frightens me a great deal. It frightens me more than words can actually say. I do find that we don't have enough of these conversations. That's why I take to the airwaves. You know, I started life as a DJ and I still play out. And I remember being on stations playing. Part of me that feels very strongly that apart from music, there are conversations that we need to be having in our communities. There are causes that we, and I think one of them is around the world are being forced into marriage. And although it might make the headlines in the United Kingdom for who are Asian. Not talking about it. My African sisters. Now, in Tanzania, it's actually against the law to marry under. The punishment for those husbands and the parents who have allowed up to 30 years in prison. Nevertheless, there are families and they still marry their daughters. They were as young as 12. Now for them it means that the parents will and they'll receive, in Tanzania we've got to recognise the staple of village life and some that makes me consider them more valuable than their own. Local authorities and activists are working to prevent these girls often interrupting some. Girls are taken to a show, many for the first time. Many, that's for the first time. Families who hope to marry early don't send them to school as they believe an educated wife is likely to be opinion immediate, so she won't be worth as much. Oh, so we're looking at girls who are 13 marrying much older men. Oh, something that is quite sad. Quite sad. But the good news, there are activists, male and female activists, who are working to stop this. Tanzania. Let me cross over to Kenya. Let me share this with you. This is for what's happening in Kenya.
It seems clear that bride price is being used not as a gift, as some people would have you believe, but as a commercial transaction. The young bride has become a valuable commodity who can bring a valuable source of income to an impoverished rural family. With current market prices at approximately 500,000 shillings or $190 for a cow, it's no wonder that we see ever younger girls being married off.
So we've got the activism. We're definitely trying to do something about it. This is a headline. This is a subject. It's being spoken about clearly. You've got some activism, but it's happening more, not less. And that to me is quite frightening. We've got in a position where girls, sometimes I wonder what we've done. What we've done for people to treat, for men to treat women in this way. And I know there are many of you listening to me who say, look, it's not all men. And I try to explain this, and I do get into trouble, but bear with me. I know that not all men behave like this. I have brothers, I have a father. But I do know if most men set about, and I don't mean to fight, but set about the men who do behave like this, we can change behaviour. That's where part of my frustration lies. We need all men, or the men who don't behave this way, to have an influence on their brothers, on other men, their cousins, their uncles, who do behave this way. That's how we change behaviour. We know peer pressure works, because we see it work in the negative, but I think we can use that same peer pressure and use it to work in a positive, to get men to change their minds, to show them the error of their ways. To actually say that this isn't right. You know, bride price, selling your child, because that's what it is, selling your child for sex. We say, we talk about child marriage. It's not a marriage. Whose marriage is it? She cannot consent. She's a child. Doesn't matter if she's in Ethiopia, Uganda, Tanzania, or Kenya. Doesn't matter. Or Nigeria. It doesn't matter. She's a child. child cannot consent. They don't have any sense. Having sex with them just means that you rape them. Doesn't mean all of a sudden that their brains are going to work, or they're going to skip forward the experience or be imbued with the experience of the next 10 or 15 years. So my frustration is always that, why don't men stand up more? I know it's hard, isn't it? It's hard, but I think, why aren't we standing up and helping? And I guess that's why I think it's so important to talk about this. I think it's just so important. And it's not just that the woman loses her rights in terms of, I keep saying woman, girls. It shouldn't happen to girls or women. Even if you're 16 or 17, it's still wrong. I think you have to be willing and able to make a choice to say you want to get involved with the relationship. Look, I know this sounds really odd, and people say, oh, but it happens a lot. But I don't think that children be having sex. I don't even think the age of consent should be 16, 18. Of course, there are some who will break the law. I think society encourages that, by the way. And I think there's a difference when two 16-year-olds or 16 and 17-year-old want to get involved in some form of adult relationship. I think that's totally different to children being forced into relationships with men, especially men who do not even regard them as human. You don't have to take my word for it. Let's listen in to an expert talk about the subject.
Mifumi consider that at least 60% of domestic violence cases reported to them are bride price related. We spoke to Solomon, who works at Mifumi. She never ceases to be surprised by the reasons men give for beating women.
Most will say, like from the east, most of them are really going to say, I'm beating my cows. From the north, where I come from, they're going to say it's a sign of love. Apparently, this is what I've heard. The women say if your husband doesn't beat you, it means he's seeing another woman. So everything you do is okay with him because he's seeing some woman out there. While on the other hand, if he beats you up, it means maybe he's noticed that you've annoyed him, or you've done something to the children that he doesn't like. So he has interest in your life and in what you're doing. So he beats you as a sign of love. Others think other men beats women because, he's the boss in the home. That's what he knows. He's the head of the family. He has a right to discipline. And then for some, their excuse is the Bible. Woman, be submissive to your husband. So if she's not being submissive, how do you get her to listen? Hit her.
We have seen that educated men in Uganda don't necessarily agree that bride price should be paid. But Solomon thinks that they still see women as subordinate to them.
Even the educated men will pay bride price, but you will still hear comments. The language they use when referring to their wives, it's very derogatory, and it still puts them on the same pedestal as the man in the village who thinks he's actually exchanging something for his wife, and it's not an appreciation. Men will say, oh no, women's families will say, oh, it's an appreciation. Men will say, it is actually not an appreciation, I am paying for your daughter. Although they will not say it out loud, because they know it sounds bad. But that, to the bottom line, that is it.
But perhaps occasionally, women play their own role in perpetuating the practice.
Because there are women out there who say, you haven't paid for me, you don't have the right to hit me. So men will also be pushed to pay because they know it shows I actually own you. That exchange, bride price, actually makes people seem more together than even the church wedding. When women have been married in church and no bride price has been paid to their families, they actually also say it. You haven't given my family anything. You can't push me around. You can't. Whether this union is before God or before Allah, you can't push me around. But if bride price has been exchanged, that is what makes the difference. I've come across so many women who say if a man can't afford to pay bride price, he's not man enough. If he cannot afford to pay the 8 cows my mother is asking for, he's not man enough. He will not be able to take care of me in the marriage. I've come across girls who say, if the man cannot pay what he is being asked to pay for now, then where is my future with this man? We are going to starve. Our lawmakers are human. For instance, there was a time we were at an exhibition, and there were a number of members of parliament. But the first thing they told us was, you Mifumi women, you're the people who don't want to get married. I have paid bride price. I paid bride price for my wife. How am I going to sit there and not get rich, don't get cows, yet I have 5 daughters? It doesn't make sense. Now, if a member of parliament has such an attitude, I'm sorry to say, such a law is really going to take a really long time.
Children in Malawi, especially when they're young, they have very high hopes for the future.
I wanted to remind you that it's children that we're talking about, young people, little ones that are being forced into marriages. It isn't an Asian problem, it's a problem that women around the world have. And that, let me backtrack, that children, that girl children, that the female around the world has. And that problem exists. Children are beaten and marriage. It's 5 o'clock, 17:01 in be precise. I'm going to do week, book of the week. Come back, we're going to look and round up this subject of child brides. We've got to have a look at Brexit, and of course we've got to do arts exhibitions and events. But let's kick off with Book of the Week. Hi, you're listening to Roz on Starr Radio. Join me every Tuesday from 4 until 6, where we look at life in 3D and tackle the tough topics. Desert Flower by Waris Dari. Waris Dari ran away from her oppressive life in the African desert when she was barely in her teens, illiterate and impoverished, with nothing to her name but a tattered shawl. She travelled across the dangerous Somali desert to Mogadishu, the first leg of a remarkable journey that would take her to London, where she worked as a house servant, then to every corner of the globe as an internationally renowned fashion model, and ultimately to New York City, where she became a human rights ambassador for the UN. Desert Flower is her remarkable story. Desert Flower is an autobiographical account of how Waris Dari survived female genital mutilation, FGM, and many rape attempts, escaped the life plans her family had for her in Africa, and created a completely new future for herself. She left her desert nomadic clan as a young 13-year-old girl after being betrothed to a much older man. She trekked solo to Mogadishu and from there managed, through relatives, to get a posting as a maid, and became an icon for helping other females whose lives started with a parallel path to that of her own. Waris overcame obstacles that most of us wouldn't even dream of. Waris's 1998 book was my gateway to a better understanding of the terrible tradition of female genital mutilation in Africa. The book educates the reader about the concept of, and I quote, the ritual of ignorance, unquote. It's a very good first-hand account of the brutality of FGM. Waris manages to convey the horror and trauma of being subjected to FGM, a practice that causes more problems than it prevents. It's there to prove girls, even babies, are untouched and innocent. It's there as a symbol of the ultimate good woman. Desert Flower will convince you that as a human being, we have a duty, irrespective of where we come from, to speak out against this practice. Her story incorporates the lives of many women in varying circumstances and in a number of countries. But ultimately, it comes back to women's plights, a life of suffering physically, intellectually and emotionally. Decisions were made for girls and women, and there was a double standard that became a lifelong burden. That remains true today. Warris also touches on the other important issues for black women, for instance, coercing African models to wear an abundance of white foundation. Warris describes how at one point she felt frustrated because she felt that she was being turned into a twisted black version of Cindy Crawford. The writing is mediocre, but the story is compelling. Desert Flower is a tremendously important book told by a woman who shows the best of the human spirit. Admirably, she quit modelling to establish the anti-FGM Desert Flower Foundation and other humanitarian organisations. Her literal and figurative journey from hardship and hard work to success and activism is inspiring. There is a lot to admire about Warris Daweh, and this book deserves your attention. Desert Flower by Warris Daweh. You're listening to Insight with Roz on Starr Radio, tackling the tough topics.
too, honey. I decided you are the him for me. Oh my boy. Yes, I'm running me down, telling me wait, running me down and telling me you will never find the boys the way you got me. That's the way you got me, baby. That's the way you got me, baby.
Hi, you're listening to Roz on Star Radio. Join me every Tuesday from 4 until 6 where we look at life in 3D and tackle the tough topics. Good afternoon, Star Radio UK. Roz with you up until the hour of 6, 1800 hours. Yay! It's got a while to go. I think I've got the point over. I really hope that this conversation around girls, females being forced into marriage is something that you will start to have. And I just wanted to take it one step further. I don't know how many of you have come across the case of Nora Hussein. She's from Sudan. Nora was the victim of a brutal attack by her husband and 5 years imprisonment is what she's received now for acting in self-defense, which I think is a Nora's story troubled me. Troubled me because, you know, we've been talking about this whole thing about what it means. That her story, the issue that we're talking about is, okay, she had life in prison. And personally, I don't think she should be going to jail. Nora was 16 when she was forced into a marriage. This is what I'm talking about. And, you know, oh, excuse me, wrecking the microphone. Throughout the conversation, have you noticed there was a theme that these children were beaten by the men? One young woman's story, the husband, and again, much older man, was lighting matches and throwing them at her. At one point, you know, she's got clothes on. Her clothes caught. And when she got up to get away, he was actually strangling her. These are horrific stories that are happening every single day. I don't know why the men behave like this. You've heard some of the explanations. I just think it's inhumane. But let's get back to Nora Hussein. She was 16 when she was forced into marriage. Her father and new husband signed a marriage contract. She wanted to finish education and train as a teacher. Again, girls getting married young, they are denied education. It gives them any form of independence. When the family insisted she marry, she ran away to her aunt's house. When she finished school, that's 2017, into returning to the family home, and they handed her over to the husband, forcing her to move into home. The first time Nora's new husband raped her, he got his two brothers, a male cousin, to pin her down. The next day, I want you to be clear about this. This girl was signed away at the age of 16. 3 years later, finished school, tricked into returning home, handed over to this man she doesn't know, allegedly called a husband. He's raped because he gets his two brothers and a male cousin to pin her down. The next day, he tried to rape her again, but she defended herself. In the ensuing struggle, husband, Hamid, sustained fatal knife wounds. In other words, he was dead. Noor went to her family and told them what happened. Her father took her to the police station and her family have disowned her. Police, this is Sudan, this is current. The police charged her with murder. At the trial, the judge applied an outdated law that does not recognise marital rape. There was a medical examination. They did say that she sustained injuries from the fight with Ahmad. That's the husband. Charged with intentional murder, and believe it or not, the girl was defending herself at 19 years old, sentenced to death. It's now been reduced to 5 years, which I think is better than the death penalty. Better, but it's wrong. And this is what happens when girls are forced into marriage. Now, somewhere, somebody may turn around and say, well, there's been a successful child marriage, but there's a problem there. Children shouldn't be married. 7, 8, 9, 10, 5, 4, should not be married, should not be having sex, should not be in those relationships. They should be learning to grow up and adjust. And I guess if today's show gets us talking about this, I mean, the case with Noor Hussein, that's like when did the verdict come in? When did I hear about? 27th of June. The whole point about this is we've got to get to the stage where we're having these conversations, and that's what I want today to be about. I just want us to have looked at this, recognised it isn't a problem about Asia or the Yemen, or it's terrible in the Yemen. It's a problem around the world that affects one section of the species in particular, and that's girls who grow up to be battered and broken women, burdened down with 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 children, and that doesn't do anybody any good. It doesn't make for happy lives. It makes for miserable lives. We don't want that. We want beautiful things. We want beautiful lives. We want the best that we can for the people. No. Don't we? Isn't that what it's about? Isn't life about happiness? And we're going to come to making choices. Do you know, I nearly played Childish Gambino. I thought, no, I want to get it a little bit up tempo. I want it to be all nice and warm and fun and light. Childish Gambino was not the one. Oh, I know. This will be good fun. So, back after this. Hi, you're listening to Roz on Starr Radio. Join me every Tuesday from 4 until 6, where we look at life in 3D and tackle the tough topics.
Like I come too far and I wanna find my way back home. When I get over there, won't have to want for nothing. Streets will be paved with gold when I get back home. from a living in this here world. Home is what I'm aiming for. When I get over there, there's gonna be nothing but a party. I'm gonna have everything I want, everything I want. I'm gonna talk a word today. I'm gonna sing on dance. Tell it, tell it, tell it, tell it. All that you done for me in my lifetime. Until then I won't even think about it. No, it's all too deep. My soul, my soul, my soul, my soul, my soul, my soul. Won't even think about it. No. Won't even talk about it. It's all too deep. Whoa, it's all too deep. I want to. Won't have to worry about it no more. No. Everything I want, everything I want, everything I think home is where I want to be. Wanna have everything I ever wanted in my life. Home is where I wanna be. Until then it's all too deep. It's all too deep. My soul.
I was enjoying that so much. I was rocking away in the studio when I'm supposed to be getting ready for arts exhibitions and events. Well, that's not so good, is it? Good afternoon, you tuned in to me, Roz, with Insight here on Starr Radio UK. It's a beautiful day out there, and when the weather's that sweet, somehow or the other, I just love playing reggae at the same time. It's either reggae or house, but don't start me on house and garage. Let's go to what's on and see what madness is happening in terms of arts exhibitions and events that are going to fire us up for the week ahead. This week's arts exhibitions and events from I'mJustSaying.com. For more information, go to www.I'mJustSaying.com. Pick of the week is the Lieutenant Richmore, which is on at the Noel Coward Theatre. Mad Patrick is a terrorist deemed to violence and is a member of the IRA. The question becomes, who knocked over Mad Patrick's cat over a lonely road on the island of Ishmael, and was it an accident? He'll want to know when he gets back from a stint of torture and chip shop bombing in Northern Ireland. He loves the cat more than he loves life itself. The Lieutenant of Ishmael is a hilarious, acute observation of violence. It's a rare opportunity to see the revival of Michael Dougherty's critically acclaimed brilliant satire on terrorism. It's on until the 11th of September. And I've already told you that the weather is so grand in the UK that one of the things I think we should all be doing is finding a park and picnic. You can find great parks all over London, but here's a few. Clissold Park in Northwest 16. It's lush and calming and covers 55 acres of open space in Stoke Newington. It's charming, it's got a Grade 2 listed building, and it's got some wonderful wildlife going on there, as well as a terrapin pond. Crystal Palace, SE20. is a Grade 2 listed green space in southeast London. It's vast, grassy and very hilly. So you can have great fun climbing to the top and looking across London. It's 200 acres of grass and home to one of London's biggest mazes. There's a collection of 100-year-old life-size dinosaur sculptures, a children's farm and a racetrack for remote cars. So somewhere to go. Victoria Park, E9. It's one of the oldest public areas. It's been there for about 170 years, and although it's favoured by bloggers and commuting cyclists, it spans 86 hectares. So it's an ideal place to actually grab some lunch and a snooze. And over in West London, there's Holland Park, in the shadow of those posh houses of Notting Hill. It's a striking mix of the practical and the beautiful landscape. So what you have is an overgrown woodland in some areas, and yet some really well coiffured grounds. So check out Holland Park. The Camden Fringe Festival is on. It finishes on the 26th of August. You can find me tonight at looking at the Wolf at the Cockpit. It's tonight only. It's on at 9 o'clock. It's a twisted fairy tale set in a modern post-Me Too world. Breathe is on at the Bunker until the 31st of August. Breathe is the latest play by James Jacques, and it explores the anxieties of everyday life. Forbidden Fruit, a Flavour, a part of the Camden Fringe. That's on at the Cockpit. I want to be there tomorrow night. It's an exploration of sexual harassment. Forbidden Fruit, a Flavour, is devised to actually deal with the fact that in society we encourage the exploitation and the sexual harassment of women. And if you've got young people and you want to take them out for a break, there's Sea Creature, Life Beneath the Ocean. That's at CPT. Sea Creature, Life Beneath the Ocean is an exhibition. It's a unique, awe-inspiring, eye-opening insight into science and the anatomy of sea creatures. This blockbuster exhibition is packed with 54 body real species, 150 body parts and organs, and an interactive digital show. Sea Creatures invites family audiences to explore and truly understand marine life, conserving marine species and raising awareness of marine conservation. If you want more, you know what to do. Check out www.imjustsaying.com. That is IMJUSSAYIN.com. That's IMJUSSAYIN.com. That's your roundup of arts, exhibitions and events this week. And I always say to you, remember, go to the website and see what's happening there as well. A bit more music, and when we come back from the... I can't believe it! We're nearly 3/4 of the way through the programme. And I want to talk about marriage a bit more. But we're going to do that when we come back from the break. I just have to decide what I'm going to tempt you with. This is good fun.
Into Roz on Starr Radio. Join me every Tuesday from 4 until 6, where we look at life in 3D and tackle the tough topics.
to this special guy. When he had enough of them, he bought himself a cherry pie. He gave me $1, a blood-soaked dollar. I cannot get the spot out, but it's okay, it still works in the store. Greasy man, come and dig my well. Life without your water is a burning hell. Stuff me up with your homegrown nice. Anything make me shit nice. And a 2-pound chicken tastes better with friends. A 2-pound chicken tastes better with two. And I'm nowhere to find you. So listen to the words I say. Let it sink into your head. My body go round and round and round. Now I'm in your bed. How did I get ahead? Turn your fingers to my head. Fingers to my head. Give me a chance. Give me a breath. I'll give a thing a caress. Would you listen to the words I say? Sound like a flow bouquet. I leave it go round and round and round and round. Okay, take a picture of the life all day. Run your fingers to my head. Do it till you get so bad. Give me a head. Give me a head. Off with this head. Hey, hey, hey. Nobody in the water fountain. Flow bouquet. I leave it go round and round and round. Side to side. Okay, take a picture of the life all day. If you say fingers, nothing we should do. Where you going? Nowhere. We're gonna get the water from your house, and get the water from your house, and get the water from your house, and get the water from your house.
What can I tell you?
You're listening to Insight with Roz on Star Radio, tackling the tough topics.
Beautiful stuff there from, who's it? The Tune Yards. That's it. It was the Tune Yards. Absolutely brilliant stuff. Love it, love it, love it. Shall we do one more? Or shall we look at this question of marriage? Let's have a look. 33 minutes to go. I just love my music. I can't help myself. Oh, we've got to do this one. We've got to do this. Then we're going to come back and spend the last few minutes talking about marriage.
So you tell me that I'm a lucky man. And you're so right. Yes, you're so right. Girl, you know, there's no other place I'd be right now. Holding hands with my baby. So I'm gonna love you until the sun comes up. Be that extra sugar you need in your cup. From this love, there's no holiday. From this love, we won't take a break, no. From this love, there's no holiday. From this love, we won't take a break, no. Not a day goes by when it's me alone. Like a soldier, can't wait to come back home. And to let you know, every man on earth wish they had you for their special lady. So I'm gonna love you until the sun comes up. You're that extra sugar I need in my cup. From this love, there's no holiday. From this love, we won't take a break, no. From this love, there's no holiday. From this love, we won't take a break, no. So you tell me that I'm a lucky man. And you're so right. Yes, you're so right. Girl, you know, there's no other place I'd be right now. Holding hands with my baby. So I'm gonna love you until the sun comes up. Be that extra sugar you need
Well, wasn't that beautiful? From this love, there's no holiday. From this love. Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. And it's a beautiful tune. It's a beautiful tune. But it takes me very nicely into a subject that, this is the other side of what we spent the first hour talking about. This is us as adults getting married. Or as people with a little bit more sense. I'm not really sure that we have more sense, but hey. One of the leading barristers in this country has actually said that we should think a little bit more closely about what we do when we talk about getting married, who we get married to, you know, that whole involvement. And I think there's actually mileage in what she says, which may cause some people a little bit of angst. But what this barrister is saying is that in school, marriage should be taught. Now, this is coming from one of the UK's most famous divorce lawyers. She believes that there should be a change in legislation, but she's urging that schools do more to help young people be practical about marriage. So, Barrister Shackleton of Belgravia wants schools to help pupils view marriage as the most important decision they make. It's not just about the heart. Now, I think in the first part of the programme, it wasn't about the heart at all. It was about the fact that girls were seen as less than human. In fact, they were seen as property. Over here, it's all about one cornetto, isn't it? Man in a gondola, with a hat, going down the river, your heart fluttering, oh, he's lovely, oh, he's great, oh, she's beautiful, oh, she's... And it's so much more. And what happens with relationships like that is when the parents break up, as Baroness Shackleton of Belgrave says, it's the children who are the sad losers when parents are selfish and decide their desires override those of the family. So under the current system in England and Wales, a couple has to prove in court that their marriage has irretrievably broken down. Some of you may have heard that last week, a woman who's been married for a number of years to the same man was not able to get a divorce from her husband. They must prove this by citing one of 5 grounds, including adultery, unreasonable behaviour or desertion. The other non-fault grounds are living apart from 2 years if both spouses consent, or 5 years if not. So, Shackleton's been a divorce lawyer for more than 40 years. I don't know if it's pertinent, but she happens to be a solicitor to Prince William and Harry. She said that the current divorce law was archaic and the couples had to exaggerate or agree to get a divorce. But she was talking to the Beeb, and she said that it's no good just changing divorce laws to dissolve the marriage. What was needed was reform on the laws around sorting out finances during divorce. The Baroness is supporting a bill proposed by her fellow peer Baroness Beach, which would replace the current system for splitting money in divorce cases. Baroness Shackleton was speaking after research from a University of Exeter, and they set out 10 critical questions for couples to gauge if their relationship might stand the test of time. The study found that the best marriages were built on friendships, respect, realistic expectations, shared interests and humour. I'm just doing the math to see how I'm doing in this frame. There's friendship, realistic expectations, shared interests, humour and respect. Baroness says to avoid untold grief of separation, she hoped the research would be introduced into schools and that they would devote just a little time to students to focus on the most important... No, I've got this one. This one, I've actually got the quote for you. Right, I've got to quote this one because I love the way she put this. That schools would devote just a little time to get students to focus on what is the most important decision they make, which is basically who they breed with. I suppose that's one way to put it. So, this university came up with 10 critical questions. And these are the things you should ask before embarking on a serious relationship. So, long-term relationships last when they are built on friendships, respect, realistic expectations, shared interest and humour. This is according to research done by the University of Exeter. I am no specialist in marriage and relationships and all the rest of it, but I do think that when you are friends with your partner, I think when you respect each other, I think when you do have shared interests and encourage independent interests, when there is humour in your relationship, yeah, I do. I honestly do think that the relationship has a far better chance. Now, their research was taken from evidence from couples as well as family lawyers, mediators and judges. And that's how they've managed to identify the key points which other couples can use to reflect on. Apparently this stuff will tell you if you can stand the test of time. So here are the questions. Are my partner and I a good fit? Well, I often wonder how you can actually work that one out. I guess it comes back to, are you friends? I mean, this is me just trying to work it out aloud in my head while sharing with you. So how can you tell if you're a good fit? Well, maybe you're a good fit if you have shared interests, humour, realistic expectations, a good friendship, and you respect each other. Personally, I think if you respect each other, if you've got proper respect in a relationship, I think the relationship will work. I think respect is so paramount to a relationship. Second question, do we have a strong basis of friendship? Well, I think that was one of the criteria you need in order to work out whether or not you're a good fit. The other question is, do we share the same things in our relationship? Do we want the same things in our relationship and out of life? Do you know, that's quite an interesting question, because I don't think people ask that question often enough. I think couples talk about bold dreams, and I think the other thing is, one's expectations when you're in your teens and when you're in your 20s are very different. I mean, speaking to somebody who's done 20s and 30s, I find that I'm a very different person. And in some ways, you know, that level of you're prepared to put up with something, I think mine's gone. I'm not. I keep saying I'm in trouble if my relationship ends. No. I'll just be crying for the rest of my life, because I really don't know if I've got what it takes to start all over again. Then another question. I thought this question was really good. Do we see the best in each other? Because I think it's really easy to identify the faults in somebody. And isn't it interesting? I've really got to contrast it with the first part of the programme. Because here we're talking about things that last for life. How can a 7-year-old girl, remember, I'm going back to the first part of the programme here, when we looked at forced marriage. How can a 7-year-old girl have something in common? How could you possibly have something in common with a man who's 3-4 times your age? How can you? How can you see the best in each other when the man that's your husband is beating you? Remember that case I told you about, where he was lighting the matches and throwing it on the woman? And when you start to look at it from what we can experience as human beings, it really does put the first part of the programme into sharp contrast, doesn't it? But by the same token, I think it really asks us to look at ourselves and what we want. Do I see the best in my partner? I guess if I didn't, I wouldn't be there. I think I always have more good things to say than bad. Because I think if we're talking about partners, remember, I'm not a relationship counsellor, we're just talking, okay? We're just friends hanging with a coffee and talking. But I think if we're continually saying bad things, I think that must raise questions for us, right? It must make you suspicious. So I think that's a good question. Do we both work on keeping our relationship vibrant? Do you know what? These are some very good questions, you know. I think you can get so comfortable being with somebody that you don't actually think about that. I think we become so... It's like comfy old slippers, aren't they? You know those slippers you should have thrown away but you don't, and you only ever feel embarrassed about them when somebody comes around. Then you think, these sheepskins have had their day. It's that kind of thing, isn't it? So I think that's a good question that we should always ask ourselves. I think maybe it would be a good idea, and this is me, again, sharing my thoughts with you, because that's what I tend to do. This isn't the political stuff. Well, in a way it is. In a way it's political, and it's political because, remember, from this situation, from this conversation, from these questions, from the way we behave in relationships, we make laws. There are political decisions that are made. So there's definitely a political element to this. And that's what I mean. Sometimes we don't always realise how the law hits us. But keeping a relationship vibrant, yeah, that's important. Do we discuss things freely and raise issues with each other? I don't think people do. I sounded like I came from up north then. That or my headphones. So that's quite interesting. That's quite an So that's one that I think that we need to consider. Are we committed to pulling through the hard times? Oh wow. Now that, my dears, has got me thinking about a totally different song. Yes, it has. It's got me thinking. I've got some sheer doors going through my mind. Let me see if I can find it. I love this song by Sheer Doors that I'm going to share with you. Well, I would share it with you if I can find it. This is the whole problem. I've got so many songs sitting here looking at me. Oh, I want to play Got to Have Your Love. Oh, it's too romantic. Where's my song? Stay right there. I'm looking for it for you. Oh, but then I do like me some Jill Scott. No, this is naughty, you know. I've got far too many good songs. Okay. Let me see. Oh, what about Keena? I haven't played you any Keena for a while. Okay. I don't know. Alright, I will find the song when I've done the rest of the list. I wanted to split the list, but now I can't split the list for you. I'm going to have to go through it all and then come back with my song for you. And I will come back with my... Do you know what? I'm going to split the list. I'm going to do the song and then I'm going to come back.
Got to have all your loving. I'ma be to your honey, wanting you more and more. Move me, baby, to the very core. Seeing you is a dream never ending. Boy, I'm feeling your touch, and you know that I'm trembling. Boy, you know that I got your loving, the one I feel like kissing and hugging. And the time when I'm feeling lonely, just wanna have you nearby to hold me. Said I got your love. I'm so proud to be your woman. Never thought true love I'd find, but our love just keeps on growing. You know my heart is forever yours. Can't imagine life alone, all without you, honey. Under your spell, so don't wake me up. If this love really is a dream, don't wanna give you up. Oh, you know that I got your loving, don't wanna feel like kissing and hugging. Anytime when I feel lonely, just wanna have you nearby to hold me. Boy, I got your loving.
love should be. That to me, that song, it's just about love. And that's why I played it. I thought it was a brilliant point at which to share that song with you as we look at relationships, because that to me, it just had that lightness, that vibrancy, that kind of seeing the best in each other. It had all those things that love should have. Oh, I love the song. That's She Adores. You can get the song from their website, www.sheadores.com. SHEADORES.com. It was vibrant, wasn't it? It was great. So, in terms of the things, these 10 questions, do we both feel we can discuss things freely and raise issues with each other? That song didn't address that, but when you care about each other, then there's that vulnerability, isn't it? There's that feeling safe in the relationship. So I think that's a really important question. Are we committed to working through the hard times? What a brilliant question. And I think there's too much of that, wanting to walk away today. That's why I think it's important that divorce is difficult. But, and this is where I look at it slightly different, I think marriage is too easy. And I think we should make marriage harder to get into and make divorce easier. Because if you have to climb the obstacles to get into it, then maybe people will think twice about getting involved and why they get involved. When we face stressful circumstances, would we pull together to get through it? Do we have supportive others around us? Do you know what? These are terrific questions. I think they are terrific questions from the University of Exeter. And I agree that this is something that should be taught in schools. I do. I think there's two, you know, when you look at the television and all, when you listen to music, not hip hop, some hip hop, I don't know what happened to romance, but it's almost like romance has been thrown out of the window. And I love the idea of people, instead of drawing up, oh, he's tall and he's dark and he's handsome. I've put up, oh gosh, Black Women Talking with Sidel. So if you go onto our website, Starr Radio, you will find it's up there. And if you listen to some of Sidel's comments, it kind of fits in to these very questions that have been put out. Because one of the things, Sidel's really, really tall. She's 6 foot. So she's actually gone out with somebody shorter, and she's saying in the meaning of a relationship, a man's height isn't the most important thing. And I get that. And that's why I love these questions. So I think, although we have difficulties in relationships, we can help ourselves as women, as men, by asking these really pertinent questions. Is my partner a good fit for me? Do we have a strong basis of friendship? Friendship's really important, you know, because friendship can take you through so much. Take you through so much if you've got somebody in your corner. You do want to have the same things out of life. Do you know, I'm amazed, and this is real life. I've had boyfriends tell me that they are upset that their girlfriends have had children because they didn't want any. I've had girlfriends upset because the boyfriend didn't want children. And I think, well, when did you think you ought to have this conversation? And that's why I think the expression being in lust is so important, because that lasts for a little while. But the fire in a relationship, the belly of a relationship, is rooted in friendship and trust. And that's just my opinion. As I said, I'm not some sort of counsellor. I'd be rubbish at it. But that's the belly, I think, of a relationship. Pulling in the same direction. Wanting to spend time. Now, Professor Anne Barlow from the University of Exeter Law School actually led the study. And she said, of course, every relationship is different. And it's important that couples build relationships that are meaningful to them. But we found thriving relationships share the same fundamental qualities. Mostly, the couple have chosen a partner with whom they are a good fit. They are compatible with the person they are considering sharing their life with, and flag the importance of dealing with issues when they arise as a result of nurturing the relationship over time. And again, we can get really lazy in relationships that that we've had for a while. So I think this is something that is worth paying attention to. Isn't it amazing? One program, and we had the first part, which is quite sad and raised difficult questions and concerns for us, and then we've got this part of the program where we can look at the relationship in Europe, let's say, or anyone who is coupling up as adults, and look at things to actually make ourselves make better decisions. Baroness Shackleton, who is a partner at Payne, Hicks and Beach, says, "Wearing my professional hat as a divorce lawyer for over 40 years, more than 50% of the people consulting me about divorce have said they realised either before or very soon into their marriages that they were fundamentally incompatible with their partners." Whoa! It's so important that we meet with people and fit together in order for relationships to work. And I think it doesn't matter where you come from. I think that is the important thing. So I agree very much that we need to be teaching rules about relationships in school. Now, some people will be listening and say to me, shouldn't that be something that we do in the family? And I'll just point to the first part of the program and say no. Too often in families, too often, not all the time, too often what's important is carrying on some form of culture or tradition or stuff that I personally think's not that important. I know I get in trouble for saying this stuff, but I think life is, as you know, not a dress rehearsal. We should be as happy as we can, and being with somebody is part of that relationship. And I think here there is too much emphasis on what we look like. Compatibility and realistic expectations are what a relationship should be about. Somebody that you can trust, somebody that you can befriend. Attraction is definitely part of it. Gosh, I would never say otherwise. I would never say otherwise. But compatibility, and that's why I think people need to talk more, court more, then get married. And even over here, sometimes I think marriage is just something that one talks about. I've got to get married. It's like a to-do list. I don't think relationships should be treated that way. Anyway, 1800 hours, well out of time. I was here, and now it's time for me to go. Thank you for tuning in to Starr Radio UK. Loved having your company. Of course I did. And I will be back this time, same place, same place. This time, same place, same place. I'll be back next week, same time, same place, right here on Starr Radio.
You can catch me.
Hi, you're listening to Roz on Starr Radio. Join me every Tuesday from 4 until 6, where we look at life in 3D and tackle the tough topics.
Don't you worry about tomorrow.